What's up guys, welcome to 1x1. Today we're talking about UX research methods. What's the right method, what should you be using, and how do you know what the right method is? And is there a whole list of methods that you need to use, or are there just a few? So let's go through all of that. So the first thing people misunderstand is that UX research methods, yes, there are so many. If you look at the list, there are over 30 that are commonly used. And you're thinking, well, which one am I going to tell my boss, design teams, technical teams, and in my interview, what am I going to say? So what I really want to summarize here is that there are many methods, but commonly there's a few that keep getting used again and again. It's quite repetitive, and the reason is they're probably easier and more effective. So there's no one size fits all. Every project is completely different. If you're building an app or a website or software, you need a different method of UX research. Now, how do you know which one is right when? And that's a very common question when it comes to interviews. You need to know which method you're going to use, and they're going to ask you that. They're going to say, right, for our project, if we hire you, what method would you use? So one of the ways to assess that is to understand the needs of the project. So for example, if the project is a project that's building an app for travelers, people that are on the move, let's say they're outside a metro station, a train station, and they need information quickly, you may want to do ethnographic field studies. So you may want to go out and see them in the wild, i.e. in the real environment, and see how they would use that app. And that's what you would do in that situation. Whereas if it's a survey for users that are regularly, say, dieting or exercising, you may want a one-to-one interview or a focus group. Now, focus group is a bit different to interviews in that focus groups, you get groupthink, you get the feedback from a whole group, and you got to watch out for some of the bias and some of the key areas that you need to focus on. And one of those is, if you get a focus group, start interviewing people, and the more dominant characters in that focus group start to give their opinions, or they're strongly opinionated, which is absolutely great for qualitative data. But you don't want the quiet ones to not have had their say. So ensure that it's inclusive and you are discussing the questions with all the participants equally, and make sure nobody gets missed out. So you can explain that in your interview, explain that in your method, so that people understand that you understand each user is important. Everyone's feedback is equal. Now, is there one right method or not? There is no one right method, but interviews, focus groups, surveys, they'll be your main body of UX research methods that you'll keep using in most jobs. Now, what about things like click testing, heat maps, and how do you use them, and when do you use them? Well, click testing and heat maps are actually software that your employer will either have a license for, or you may go to your manager, your C-suite manager, and say, we want to buy this software. Now, when you ask to buy a software, you need to justify it. So you need to know why you need it and how much it's going to cost. Usually your boss is going to ask you to find out the cost of a license. Now, if it's a corporate or a government organization, they'll normally get a discounted rate. I need to haggle that price and go back to your manager and say, this is how much it's going to cost us if we buy a license, or 2 licenses, or 3 licenses. And that price could be a monthly price or an annual price. Usually you want the monthly rate because your project might not go on for more than a few months. So when you're going to get that license, you will need some training on that platform or that software. So the good news is you don't need to know how each software works. So if you've never done click testing or heat maps, you can actually quickly watch a YouTube video, follow the guide, watch their guidance videos, and quickly get up to scratch. As long as you know the principle of what a heat map does, what click testing does, i.e. heat maps will see where users are clicking the most, how they're interacting with that page, where they're interacting the most, whereas the click testing will show where they're actually clicking on the buttons, on the navigation bar, on the links. So both are very useful. If you've never used them before, I'd say watch some YouTube videos, read up on it, so that you are well versed with that, and see when it's needed. So websites that are fast, they need a quick click-through rate, they need fast engagement, i.e. people want to do things very quickly. rather than a website where you're browsing over time. Those websites do need testing with click testing or heat maps to see where users are engaging the most. But click testing and heat maps are useful for a lot of projects. So now, what other methods are there? When you're looking at methods, you also want to look at methods in which users have the opportunity to think about what feedback they want to give. So it's research methods where you're giving them more time, like surveys. So you may give them a survey where they can think about the response. The good thing about surveys is it's great for qualitative data and quantitative data. You can easily extrapolate numbers, metrics. You could say 12% of users didn't like this particular feature, or 25% would like this component to be enhanced, i.e. maybe there's a button and it's not clearly visible and you simply just have to change it into a bold text or change the color. Things like that, you can give stats back in your UX research report. You can feed back to your managers, to your interaction designer, UX designer, service designer, business analyst, whoever you're working on in that team. And don't forget, teams vary, so don't worry about knowing what every single role is, because every project is completely different. I've worked on a variety of projects and I've never had the same makeup of a team. So you can have different teams with different numbers of people. Some projects have 6 UX researchers, other projects only have 1. So it really varies. So don't worry too much about it. As long as you know what the role is defined as, and once you start a job, if you've never met a person like that in that role, Google that role, ask them what they do. Don't be scared to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask, even at the job, if you don't know something. Now, that doesn't mean you don't know your job, but make sure that you ask something if you need clarity. It's absolutely fine not to know everything. It's absolutely fine not to know all the terminology, all the language. That's completely normal. And as you start your job, you will come across terminology, ways of working, words you've never used. So if you've never used an app like Miro or Mural or Slack, it's fine to say you've never used it. There's nothing wrong. You won't be penalized for it. So when it comes to UX research methods, what you really want to do here is know all of them, well, as many as you can, and don't just think that that's enough just to know them, but know them well, so understand what they actually do. It doesn't mean you have to have done it in the real world, but it does mean that you can explain the basic functions of that and why we'd use it. But when it comes down to the method that you're going to use for a job, that could be very limited to a few. So don't worry about that too much. Don't worry about knowing how to use all of them, but know how to use them and the common ones, i.e. interviews, surveys, focus groups. These ones will come up again and again because they're very, very useful. Qualitative data is very rich in terms of its feedback to build empathy, how users feel, how they think, how they behave, what they're saying. And quantitative data is good for analytics, metrics, and proving to your stakeholders that this is what we're doing, this is how it's going to be a success, is you can measure the metrics before and after you've iterated, built a new product, built a new design. Now you can show, well, prior to the UX research, prior to us building the new design, the new iteration, the new product, 12% of users were using this feature, and now it's 37%. So those metrics are really key to proving that the project was successful, the design was successful. So you'll justify that method and explain why it's so important that you use this method to get the most effective results from your users and really identify the pain points. That can be discussion you have, but be friendly, be open to listening to their experiences. They may have an experience where they may be right, you may be wrong, but always listen, but try to get the method that you think is best. Also speak to colleagues, speak to other UX researchers. In a lot of organizations, you have a separate group for UX researchers so that you can work with them, get their advice, share templates, share good practice, and usually we meet up weekly so that you can improve on your methods and learn from each other. So that's really crucial to getting things done, and I think that's a really great idea. You can also form a group on Facebook or LinkedIn or other social media platforms to share ideas and good practice. Now, when it comes to the other areas of your UX research, i.e. sharing data, sharing your report, sharing your UX research findings, you may find that again, a lot of people don't turn up at the meeting, and it's quite annoying because you invite everybody and people don't bother to turn up. So does it show that they're not interested in what you've discovered, or they just don't have the time to have other meetings? So that'd be quite annoying, but that's just the reality of it. Maybe the way people work, people are busy, people don't have time, and they may want to see your report later. So what you do is you just convert it to a PDF, your PowerPoint or Keynote, and make sure you email everybody. One of the key things about your job is making sure everybody knows what you've done, where the findings are, where the report is. So email it through, drop it in Slack or Teams so everybody has a copy. No one can say, I didn't know what research you did. We didn't know why we're meant to build this feature or improve this page or this component. And so that way you can justify, guys, I did email on this date and everybody should have got the report. If you don't have it, I can send it again. That way you're not getting into any issues with your colleagues and the team, and especially the most important thing, the users are getting what they asked for. The improvements, enhancements that they needed, they're getting those. Don't forget to drop any questions below, guys. If you have any, more than happy to help you with your career path. And this is 1UX1. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.